Hey, welcome to Dev Better, a series where we talk about software engineering problems that we have encountered in our travels as a software engineering consulting firm. Today, I have two awesome guests with me to discuss continuous integration and continuous delivery as both a methodology and a philosophy, and also maybe we might get into some of the tools depending on how we feel. So, why don't you introduce yourselves, gentlemen?
Yeah, my name's Ahmed. I'm an engineering manager at Seven Factor.
And my name's Jordan Welch. I'm also an engineering manager here at Seven Factor.
Awesome. So today we're talking about the elusive continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline that I'm sure everyone is seeking in some way in your enterprise or in your startup. A lot of folks maybe started with this if you're working inside something like a Heroku, which kind of brings a lot of that for free in air quotes. You're really paying for it, but it's kind of for free, I suppose, to other platforms like Amazon that have things built in, or maybe you used Travis or Circle CI or Jenkins or whatever. But those are all tools. We don't really want to talk that much about tools, and that's one of the issues that I have with when people talk about continuous integration and continuous delivery. The first thing they do is they think of the little butler. Right, the Jenkins guy that ships your stuff to various positions. That's not continuous delivery and continuous integration from a philosophy perspective. That's just one tool that you could use to do continuous integration and continuous delivery as a practice. So the first thing is, let me define what continuous integration and continuous delivery are from a philosophy perspective. First off, continuous integration is the act of merging your code into a single mainline branch, be that if you're using something like GitFlow, your release branches, or if you're using trunk-based development, which I really like. Everything goes into mainline, and those code changes, which are PRs, hopefully, that are getting merged in, are all combined together into a single spot, and then tests are ran against it. Again, that's one of the critical pieces of doing continuous integration correctly is you have to have tests, in my opinion. And in the opinion of the original kind of folks who popularized CI as well. It's been around for a long time. I remember my first foray into CI was back when I worked at Danger. We had this thing called Perforce, which people may or may not even know what that is. Think of it as just, SVN, but more irritating in many ways. And we had a Jenkins server, and when I would check something in, it would run tests against it. It would push it up into the Jenkins server, and if I broke it, I got nasty emails and or text messages, which was fine. But continuous integration, the whole point of that, in my opinion, is to ensure that you have quality being shifted downstream into the deliverables that you then put into your target platform of choice, be that the cloud or on-prem servers, or if you're just like building war files or, XCs or whatever you're creating that in turn gets pushed out as your release. Now, continuous delivery is a logical and functional extension of continuous integration, in my opinion. If you don't do continuous integration very well, maybe you shouldn't be thinking about continuous delivery. But that, again, that's my opinion. Continuous delivery is the act of taking the thing that you built and getting it into the platform of your choice on a cadence that makes sense. Now, there are two seminal works in the continuous delivery world. There's a bunch of other prior art that's been around for a while, but two things that come to mind when I think of continuous delivery. One of them is The Phoenix Project by Jez Humble. Fantastic book. It's not really about continuous delivery, but it does talk about, in a fictional way, an organization that is trying to embrace the three ways and become a more, what I call a Kanban-centric, Lean Six Sigma type of organization. And you can think of that in terms of, if you get those concepts correct, continuous delivery then becomes pretty easy because you've sought out all of the bottlenecks in your system and destroyed them with extreme prejudice. And on top of that, you've realized that software engineering is not an empirical art or an empirical process rather, where it's a scientific certainty that this ticket goes into production at this date, right? We know that to not be true because, again, I've been building software for 20 years. So, experience, right? Continuous delivery is something that I believe we've overcomplicated a lot as well. And I want to open up the discussion here for a minute. Since I've monologued and defined the problem, I want to just talk through our opinions of continuous delivery from the ground as well. So I want to go through Ahmed and Jordan. I want you guys to define continuous integration, continuous delivery for us. And then we've got 4 questions that we're going to answer together and discuss and hopefully arrive at some interesting conclusions. So let's start with Jordan. Talk to me about your experience with continuous integration, continuous delivery, and how it's affected your travels.
Yeah. So I'd say that honestly, the more I get into CI/CD, the more I love working with it. Really, just the like. I think that early on you said that testing was really kind of integral to CI/CD, and I think that's really kind of the first experience with getting into it that I had was really learning about test-driven development and following kind of practices of testing your applications well, because really that is the first step of before you even start thinking about CI/CD. You should be if you don't have tests in your code base, you've missed the step. You need to go back there and start working on the testing,
Exactly.
because once you have that confidence to that your code works, that you know that you wrote good tests, and that lets kind of unlocks for you this idea that I can bring it right into the main branch, and it's out there, and I can send it out into the world. So I think that that's really been kind of my journey into it, is through testing. It unlocks in your brain that, like, if I know this works, I might as well send it out to my customer. Why am I holding it back and waiting for some like later sign off for it to line up into a exact release schedule? Really, right. I can send it out because I know it's done. All the tests run.
And that answers a few questions that people often ask us is, how do I make sure that my deliverable is quality? How do I make sure what I'm pushing out actually works? And continuous integration is a key portion of that allows you to ensure that when I push code up, if you're allowing your engineering teams to write good tests, which is a totally another episode that we will have one day, and I'm sure will be a lot of fun because there's a lot of opinions out there on TDD versus not TDD. Is red-green refactor a waste of time? Should you pair? Should you mob? Those are all really difficult questions and very contextual, although some people try to reduce them to simple answers. And I'd love to talk about that more, but you hit the nail on the head. What about you, Ahmed? What do you think?
Yeah, I would echo most of what Jordan said. I've experience with CI/CD in multiple forms, and usually when you talk about it, people like to talk about the tools, and you kind of hit on it earlier. But if you think about it in terms of a methodology or a philosophy whose goal is to basically deliver applications at a quick rate and with confidence, then you start to see things a little bit differently, and you start to see where teams have a Jenkins pipeline for the sake of having a Jenkins pipeline, even though it does the same thing that it would have done if we were doing a waterfall months ago, which is like slowing down our process and having to fix the pipeline at every single stage, so on and so forth. And so, yeah, I think testing is a common theme throughout it and is especially important. And there are a number of ways I think that they can be involved in a CI/CD, a team that uses CI/CD as part of their overall, DevOpsness. So yeah, overall, big fan.
Cool. Let's go to our questions here. Awesome. Thanks, guys. First one, which actually dovetails nicely into what you said, Ahmed. How does CI/CD affect developer happiness and our ability to impact business value? Let's start with Jordan. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd say honestly, a big part of it is just kind of bringing something into the hands of a developer that sometimes is kind of removed and can be kind of like obfuscated by the rest of business, or you have a big DevOps unit that kind of controls all of that and no one ever really knows how it works or talks to them about it ever. I think it kind of brings this understanding of the whole product life cycle to the developer, that they know about releasing it and bringing value to customers, and knowing when a feature is done and kind of the lowest amount of value they can put together that will give value out and be published. So it allows for a lot more of like a holistic approach to software development. Weirdly enough, that this thing that seems like it's a really technical thing is really actually something that just changes the way you think about software development. And maybe you finally actually understand what MVP means and how you can get that kind of minimum viable version of that feature out and really just immediately start getting it used. So I think it gives you that fast feedback that as a developer is great, just being able to immediately have in the hand of a customer or even just a UAT tester, just being able to, you write the feature one day and they're looking at it the next. There's no turnaround. You don't have to go to a big long series of meetings and push and hope nothing explodes and then have to go fix the server for half an hour because one small thing went wrong. It just kind of makes the whole process of developing software a lot more pleasant than just kind of living in your own little IDE and where you can control things.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think, Ahmed?
Yeah, I think especially from a consulting perspective, you become more aware of, the goal really is to deliver software, and that means getting stuff into production, working as expected, as opposed to I'm just going to hand off my code to a QA team or the ops team or whatever. How does it affect happiness? Well, when you're understanding that the whole flow matters, you want to be able to deploy stuff and have it not break. CI/CD is a way to help you do that, or at least it's a methodology around putting practices together to help you do that. So how does it affect developer happiness? Well, I think if you go from having to spend many nights and weekends working on an issue that was caused by your team, from that to just deploying something and then going to lunch, I think that kind of describes how.
100%. I think also from my perspective, there are companies that we've worked for that have basically given us the keys to the cloud that we're going to work in and walked away and said, go. And that kind of freaks some folks out because it's like, well, where's my DevOps team? Who's kind of doing, who's getting things into production? And it's like, well, you are. Like, why wouldn't you? It's your thing. Like, you go back to the Spotify model and sort of the early microservices implementations. People are like, yeah, the cool thing about microservices isn't that, and I know the Spotify model is different. They don't do it that way anymore. But back in the day, the allure of the Spotify model was that, you own that thing end to end to get stuff into production. That was really cool because anybody who's worked on a personal project enjoys the autonomy to be able to just, click a few buttons and get your personal project running up in Amazon or in Azure or whatever your favorite cloud platform is. And when you give your entire team that capability, you're unleashing the floodgates. One of the primary detractors that I hear around this is that, well, what about the compliance? How do you handle things like SOC Type 2 and HIPAA? And we actually have another episode we're going to do on this thing called compliance ops. And we're going to discuss that. I've got a guest coming in that works for a SOC 2 audit firm. And we're going to talk through what it means to work inside an automated framework and still be able to get these really cool things. I mean, if Capital One's doing this, which they are, then you can too, right? If a giant bank is getting code into production the same day, I'm pretty sure you can too. So, cool. Next question. Why is testing imperative for a well-designed CI/CD pipeline? You kind of hit on this a little bit, Jordan, in our previous chat, but I actually want to go to Ahmed first on this one. What are your thoughts? Why is testing so imperative?
Yeah. Well, it kind of answers the question, does the thing that I wrote do what I wanted it to do? And testing, I think by itself, it's going to require some other practices around it, like having folks that understand exactly what the needs are and collaborating to come up with the right solution. Once you have that in place, you can have the tests that reflect that implementation and have them run automatically, for example, in a CI/CD pipeline, such that when you're ready to push code, they run automatically. It gives you the confidence to know that the thing does what it needs to do, and you're good to go. I mean, what types of testing are useful is the other question. So, there are different levels of it. There is the testing that you will do as you are writing the code. We like to follow TDD. So if we're doing that, we're writing the test that fails and then writing the code that only does what you need it to do such that the tests pass, right? Usually those are going to be unit or module level tests. I also like having tests that run in a pre-production environment automatically that reflect higher level scenarios and behaviors that you define with your teams. So this basically eliminates any issues that may come up due to things being translated from a requirements document to the actual test, for example. So having that in place, running it in an environment or even in production is going to be a game changer for you.
But Ahmed, the point of CI is obviously code coverage numbers. What's your problem with that? Like,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Code coverage, I think we all kind of rag on it, saying that it means nothing. But at the same time, if you have 10%, it probably should tell you something. But I don't believe that you should be striving for like 99%.
Yeah, absolutely. Even when I was at Microsoft, we didn't do 90%. We did like 80%. Maybe they've changed it now. But code coverage is directional. It's not the gospel truth. Right. Just like story points are directional and not the gospel truth. I'm looking at you, every Scrum Master I've ever worked with. You guys are awesome and I love you, but come on now. It's directional. It's not a blood oath. And even Atlassian says that on his webpage, Jordan, what do you think?
Yeah, no, like I said before, testing really is kind of the core of that drives CI, and I think that you can really get kind of a number of different like hows to get to that. I think that BDD is a really exciting kind of world there where you bring in product at the very beginning before you're even writing tests, and you're able to kind of agree on those requirements in a way that is actually testable. And again, when you get to the end of that process, you actually know that the feature works. The feature works exactly how product wanted it. And if that's, as long as that's running in your CI/CD, you're good to go. So I think it really is the core of the whole thing.
I love BDD. That's another episode as well. There's so many good topics to talk about in this realm of software quality, because that's what you're defining and kind of putting some of the onus on the product team to make sure that you're like defining things in a way that a developer cares about. It's all about communication, right? Excellent. I think next question is probably one of my favorites. We started as a DevOps-centric firm, and when I started doing work for clients, one of the things I tried to do was to create a system where I could deploy into a target company's cloud with literally zero friction, and it was magic, and it worked all the time. And through a lot of pain and suffering, you can see some of that through episode 1 of this series. We talked about Concourse and Terraform, and that was the logical evolution of what we initially started out with. But we eventually got to a point to where I'm working for startups, and we're currently still doing this for startups, where we have runners in our admin account in Amazon that is deploying software into their Amazon accounts through IAM roles and all these best practices, which is another conversation. But the cool thing about that is whenever I would finish my work and get it merged or merge one of my team members' work and I was ready to go to production, I log into Concourse, I click the big green button, and I walk away, and I don't even care, right? How a well-functioning CI/CD pipeline should make production pushes everyday low-pressure events. And you probably heard this a lot. Why is this true? And what are your thoughts on implementing this? Let's go with Ahmed first.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't come automatically, and it's not all sunshine and rainbows, right? You have to put in the work to actually be able to get there. And it involves a lot of the things that we've talked about already. Do you have the right tests in place? That's a big part of it. Another is, for example, and this is a case-by-case thing, which is you need to define what success looks like in production, for example. Maybe have the right telemetry or, products that will let you know when things are going wrong, so on and so forth. If you have those things in place, then you can have the confidence that you can just push things and sort of walk away. I'm not sure what else to say on that subject. I feel like if you have the right alarms in place, the right monitoring, the right telemetry, and have defined the things to look out for. And by the way, this is not a one and done thing. It can be done with every piece of behavior that you're trying to change. And sometimes you don't choose the right thing to look at. And you'll know when things do go wrong. It'll tell you what you should have been looking at. And so that's when you update your telemetry, for example. But yeah, it's a well-functioning pipeline, not by accident. And those are some of the tools that you use to get there.
I think it's about having a pipeline of prerequisites in place, which is kind of funny because that's the pun for DevOps stuff is pipelines. You start with a well-defined strategy in your software engineering team to build quality into what they're doing. And that is key. You can't add quality after the fact. Granted, there are teams that I've worked on and that I've seen where you have a passel of QA engineers that are writing tests. And even at Microsoft, we had software development engineers in tests, which we don't do that anymore. But back then, these people would come behind me and they would write unit tests to the code that I wrote. And the idea was that's a good thing. Well, turns out it's not. It's kind of frustrating because I'm the person that wrote the code. And if I'm using things like test-driven development, I'm implementing well-designed software here in my little sphere to then pass downstream to the next step, which turns out, into getting things into production. So the prerequisite is good testing. The prerequisite is a quality-centric culture on your engineering crew. And then that turns into later down the road through good DevOps engineering practices that it's just magic and I press a button and I'm cool and I have all my rollbacks in place. If you're doing canary deployments, it's all automated, so on and so forth. So Jordan, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd say that the thing there that lets you be confident on your deployments and have them be low pressure is that repeatability. Show me any developer who's afraid of doing deployments on Fridays, and I'll show you all of the times that it went poorly for them. It is something that comes from experience. And I think that once you have a successful CI/CD pipeline in place that you trust and and it has been performing for you for months, if not years, and something you've repeated across clients or across projects, you have that confidence because why wouldn't you? It's been there and it's been repeatable and it's done that. It's something that you really can. I was going to say we've talked a lot about kind of what kind of tests should you have and what's your code coverage. Obviously, there's a whole conversation there, but I'd argue the level of tests you should have and the type of tests you should have, or whatever tests you need to be confident that you can hit that deploy button and walk away. Whatever that level is for you and for your project and for how your engineers work, that's the level of testing you need. If you're not confident hitting deploy and walking away, add more tests. If you are, you're good. It's really that's kind of the core of it is if you are able to have this history of successful deployments with the tooling you have in place, you can deploy whenever.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the mic drop moment. But for sure, and it's a lot of organizations struggle with this because again they try to overcomplicate things and they try to dig themselves build themselves this giant apparatus that does all kinds of things. And I'm a huge fan of keep it simple, which is another core value for people that do TDD, is write the very simplest test and then write the very simplest code that makes the test pass. So I think we overcomplicate that at times, and that's kind of what I want to close us out with, is that CI/CD, it's necessary for high-performing teams. Without it, we're really hamstringing our delivery capabilities, and that's illustrated in all kinds of literature. The Phoenix Project, the DevOps Handbook, we mentioned those at the top of the show. It's been clearly stated that companies that have proper CI/CD procedures in place that are designed to elevate that developer experience and allow engineers to push code into production, it quickly begets intense business value. And we've seen that in case studies. We've seen that through Puppet's State of DevOps. There's a lot of stuff out there that kind of points to having a proper CI/CD procedure in place being a huge lift to the company itself. The key points here are that we have to partner with the appropriate compliance bodies in our enterprise to make sure that what we're doing, that we're up to code with these changes and that we're hitting those SOC Type 2 compliance stuff. and the HIPAA compliance and all of that. But we have to make sure that we're not hamstringing our engineering teams and making them fearful to push to production, because that is where you pretty much have lost the fight. If anybody is afraid to push to prod, then you've lost the battle way early in your software development lifecycle. It's not at the end and the problems of pushing things into the cloud, I mean, unless you're writing bad Terraform, which is a different conversation. But it's more about ensuring you have the right quality built in at the very beginning of your software development lifecycle, and that you're implementing the tests that make you comfortable, that I click the button and I walk away. That's it for this episode. I appreciate everybody watching. Thanks to Ahmed and Jordan for joining. It was a fantastic, fun time, and we'll see you guys next time.